I was looking at two companies that were darlings for many, many years in medtech, which is adjacent to my space, pharma. So I know a little bit about medtech companies, not a ton. But there's two very hot companies, one called Intuitive Surgical and one called Illumina. And they're both gigantic companies that did very well. But, some people say you buy stock, forget about it forever, and you just let it run. Well, both stocks had a almost identical run for 10 years. And then Illumina went down 75, 80%, and Intuitive Surgical kept going up. How are you supposed to know, after 12 years of huge, great performance, gigantic returns, that it was all over for Illumina, and it was not all over, the good days would continue for Intuitive Surgical? The answer is, I don't know. That seems like a really hard thing to predict, and it is. So you have to constantly, I think, be vigilant about the stocks in your portfolio and not marry them, because if you married Intuitive Surgical, you did really great. But if you married, and Intuitive Surgical, for anybody who doesn't know, is a robotic surgery company. It's the future. These robots can do surgeries better than humans. So if you have a prostatectomy, which is a removal of the prostate or parts of the prostate, you're much better off, because the prostate is so tiny, you're much better off having a precision robot do it than a human. And that's why they've done really well. They've done exactly that. The Illumina is also an amazing company. They make computers that sequence genomes extremely quickly. They also have a revolutionary diagnostic that can tell if you have cancer years before anything else. Great companies, both of them. But again, after 12 years of holding both companies, you'd have been very rich, and both companies went up a ton. Both companies have revolutionary technologies. GameStop doesn't. They have a good manager. I will say that. But anyway, after holding those two medtech companies, you had to be nimble enough and smart enough to know that Illumina was about to drop 80%, that their sales would slow down, and that would be it. After the first slow quarter, you might have said, well, they had one slow quarter, but I've been in the stock 15 years, and it's been good to me. They had one little slow quarter, and I'm down 20% from the peak, but I'm still up a ton. And after the second slow quarter, now you're down 75% from the peak, and you're not up a ton anymore. You're up, sure, from the beginning, but you went from being up 10x or 15x to only being up about 3x, and it's been 15 years. And the market's up that much in 15 years. So you feel pretty dumb. And you aren't. You picked one of the best stocks ever. And Intuitive Surgical, of course, kept going and kept it. One day will have the same fate. We just don't know when. So these are like rides you're meant to eventually go off of. Berkshire Hathaway was a ride that never ended. Microsoft, a ride that never ended. Why were they rides that never ended? Well, these companies were set up specifically to compound forever. Illumina was not. Illumina was set up to make a gene computer. Intuitive Surgical is set up to make a robot surgeon. The philosophy of those CEOs is different from the philosophy of Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. Now, you could argue that this is a survivorship bias, that if Illumina's diagnostic did really well for cancer, maybe they'd go into another thing and another thing and another thing, and it would look like a Microsoft, or it would look like a Berkshire Hathaway, maybe. But at least with Berkshire, you knew from the start that this guy basically, he had no limit to his business model. Whereas Microsoft was trickier. And Microsoft peaked in 2000 and took many years to come back. So again, don't marry stocks, marry people. Even that might not work out great. But most people in the stock market, they have 5, 10 stocks in their portfolio. A lot of people with GameStop or AMC, they have 1, 2 stocks in their portfolio. That doesn't make a lot of sense, because if it's a good stock and you have 10% of your money in it, and let's say a good stock makes you 10x, which is hard to get, especially short term, but it makes you 10x over, say, 3 years. Well, that 10x of 10% of your portfolio, let's say the rest of your portfolio is flat, well, now it's 50% of your portfolio. And if you want to hold on to it, you can, but at least the worst case scenario would have been you lost all 10%, and you'd still have 90% of your money. Or if it went down and you wanted to buy a little more, you still have the cash to do it. And you wouldn't have to rely on your income, which you should probably be using somewhere, some other way. So there's no way to get rich quick in the market. I mean, I wish there was. Uh, some people do, but they get very, very lucky. Um, and the market's not for hobby. It's really a terrible hobby. Why? Well, imagine your hobby was MMA. You would fight people or spar with people if you weren't competitive. Let's say it was competitive MMA. MMA. You would fight people on your level. And the problem is the market doesn't work that way. The market is a fight with the strongest, baddest guys. Would you get into the ring with Anderson Silva or Brock Lesnar or Conor McGregor? No way. Those guys would beat the crap out of me. But could I take, I don't know, what's the guy's name again? Keith Gill? Yeah, probably. I don't know. He probably would take me. But regardless, that's closer to my level than Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar would snap me in half. Use me as a toothpick. So why do we think that we, as a hobbyist, can beat the professional on Wall Street? I hate to say this, but the answer is you can't. You might make a trade-off of volatility for performance. And with enough volatility and random distribution, anyone can look like a genius. Because if you take 1,000 people and they all go all in on 1,000 different stocks, one of them is going to look like a brilliant person. In fact, probably 100 of them might look like geniuses. And then you say, oh, these are the next 100 Warren Buffetts. And then you give them another stock. And, you're going to have 10 Warren Buffetts left. They got 2 in a row.
Well said.
You give them another.
This guy once said the difference between a genius and an idiot, an idiot and a genius is 24 hours.
Yeah. I think that a good hobby, is something that doesn't have high stakes. A good hobby is something that you can, especially if it's competitive, is something you can do safely and you're very good at. Investing is a terrible hobby for most people. It's just not something that is if you're very good at, you'd make it your day job. Because literally investing is I bet a lot. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, I think people are just lazy nowadays. Nobody wants to start a company. Everybody's a trader.
Okay.
Oh, there's more companies than we can count at Y Combinator and stuff like that. So I don't know about that.
That's a really good point you made, Martin. If you look at the World Series of Poker, every now and then you'll get an amateur at the finals table, but it's never the same amateur twice. But 7 out of the rest of them generally are the same people.
Well, that's right. And sometimes you do get an amateur, and guess what? They've become a pro. But the amount that become pros is very small. Chris Moneymaker, if I'm not mistaken, was an amateur, and he had a knack for it. But there's only one of those guys that shows up every couple of years that are that talented.
Yeah.
And again, poker is a perfect analogy because it maps to investing quite well. If you wanted to become an amateur poker player and you decided, okay, I'm going to take my life savings and go to Vegas, and you busted, you did something pretty dumb because it's a competitive space and people are there to take your money. You would be smart to diversify and say, you know what, I'm going to keep most of my stuff in cash, but I'm going to take 0.1% of my family savings and see if I'm a decent poker player. And, you go and you learn that you did well. Okay, well, maybe I'll keep learning the game, practicing, etc. Nobody wants to do that in the stock market. We just want it to go up. When moon. Everyone wants to make GameStop go up together. We're going to squeeze the shorts. Sounds like a good plan. Well, the reality is you have to spend 50, 100 hours studying the stock, financial statements, bare minimum, before you can understand a stock. I actually recommend 500 or 1,000 hours for each stock. Each stock. And you have to look at, like I said, think of the Final Four tournament in the NCAA. There's 64 teams, and you get one winner at the end. You should have 64 stocks that all are battling to be in your portfolio, and you cross each one off the list. But you have to spend time on each one because you don't know off the bat what's good or what isn't. Why? Because you don't know what's a bargain. Remember, great companies are often at such a premium to cash flow that they're not good bargains. Bad companies are often at such a discount cash flow wise that they sometimes could be good companies or good stocks, but a bad company. This happens a lot where expectations are so depressed, people think this company is such a piece of shit. That's what happened to GameStop. Bad company, great stock. And you'll have the Lululemon, great company, not so great stock lately. So you have to do the analysis for each one really carefully. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to buy any restaurants because the economy is decelerating. Well, hold on. What if there's a restaurant that stock is so depressed relative to cash flow, not just the chart's down, but you do the actual financial analysis where you say, okay, this is how much I'm paying for this cash flow. Cash flow is very regular. Why is this restaurant stock so cheap? And it's cheaper than the other ones. That might make it to the final 8, the elite 8, or the sweet 16 of your final 4 bracket. Now, I don't think you should actually make a bracket, but it's probably better than what you're doing now. What I used to do is I keep a spreadsheet of all the stocks in my what I call universe. I try to stay in one sector because if I had to learn the dynamics of every sector in the market, that'd be impossible. So I said, I'm just going to do biopharma. That way, when I look at one biopharma stock, I know the lingo, I know the way the industry works, I know how the FDA works, I can study that stuff, and it applies to every biopharma stock. So maybe you pick software, maybe you pick retail. Now you got to go look at every retail stock. Why? Because what if there's a better one than GameStop? Then it should belong in your portfolio, right? What if there's 8 better ones? Then you kick out GameStop. What if GameStop's the best one? After all that work, you confirmed it's the best one. Good, great. You could sleep at night. But I don't see how you sleep at night picking this stock randomly. You got to look at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 retail stocks, including restaurants, other retailers, stuff that looks like retail. Restaurants kind of sort of look like retail. But, have you analyzed the gap? Is Gap definitely more expensive than GameStop? It has less catalyst. Do you think it has less chance to go up? Have you looked at Bath Body Works? Have you looked at all the retail stocks? Best Buy, obviously. The big box ones, Target and so forth. You've looked at all those stocks and you've determined for sure that this is the best stock for you. I don't know. That's the way I would do it.
You mentioned
It forces you.
sorry, you mentioned Berkshire as a name where the party never ended. Do you see any of the current mega cap monsters as being in the same realm right now?
Everyone wants to do that, right?
With all the private investments sort of everything holding off from IPO and a lot of the VCs and the PE companies sort of keeping things, all of that value and the growth to themselves before they take things public, and Google and a lot of the other guys having even VC funds and other funds within the company themselves now can kind of make a case that they've been sort of stacking themselves in a similar way.
It seems really tough because the key thing about Berkshire was you had this one man who was young, then middle-aged, then old, then very old, running the thing. Bill Gates is kind of like that at Microsoft. Many people say he still controls the greater strategy. I'm not sure. But I think that that's pretty important. This like big leader with a big vision and personality. Elon, maybe. But the problem with Elon is he's got his bets, his diversification spread over multiple companies that you may or may not be able to buy stock in, like X and SpaceX, which are privately held. Not impossible to get some stock, but not easy. And certainly SpaceX is very large now. So Elon is probably the closest. And obviously, the markets discovered him. Everyone knows about him. It's not like an underground, thing. The other baby Berkshires also kind of run their course. So, I mean, I'm open-minded if I hear about one, but I don't hear about any company that's that diverse. There are some wonderful companies that are mostly one-trick ponies, and the trick is lasting a long time, and it can last for a very, very long time. Um, Regeneron is a good example of a biopharma company that the managers are now very old. They started off, kind of middle-aged, and they built a wonderful company. Vertex, maybe another one. I'm not sure that they have the magic they once had, and the luck I think they had, maybe running out. Those are a couple in my space in biopharma. In software, almost everyone's a one trick. Maybe Salesforce. Salesforce is, as much as I dislike the CEO personally, he's obviously very good at what he does, and he's been building Salesforce into a hell of a company. So that's another one I could see. Could that get to $1 trillion or a couple trillion someday? Sure.
Martin, did you get
Funny
into
because
any of the biopharma stocks that, kind of rose with that weight loss drug, Ozempic?
Yeah, I know the space well. I was around the first GLP ever in 1999 and
Oh,
2000.
shit.
It's been 25 years of GLPs, and they're so mainstream now. Novo, it was funny. When I worked for a Tiger Club, there was a Tiger Club called Shumway, which was one of the most celebrated hedge funds. Chris Shumway
I know Chris.
was a dude. You know Chris?
Well, all of his spinoffs, John Thaler, etc. Of course, great guys.
Wow. Yeah, Chris was a guy at Tiger. Um, he was a president of Tiger, basically. And then he started his fund. And, we would trade with them sometimes. And he was huge into Novo Nordisk. And I didn't get it. And Novo just kept going up and up and up and up and up. And it was like a 20 billion market cap. Now it's a 400 billion market cap. And I was actually short the other GLP, Amlin, which cost me fairly dearly. It got acquired, but it did become the dog that I thought it would. But it became that dog within Bristol Myers and AstraZeneca. So it was a weird deal too. They kind of co-bought it together. But anyway, what I never thought obesity would be a big deal, which sounds weird. But for years, obesity was just a non-indication in medicine. It just wasn't something where the drugs were good enough to merit medical intervention. You'd lose 3% of your weight, 5%. And truth be told, Ozempic wasn't that great until they discovered higher doses of it, and longer term usage kind of would get you pretty solid results. But even Ozempic is kind of, quite frankly, like, it's not a panacea. I think the Mounjaro and the next drugs coming out are really going to be good. So I think Novo, of course, is working on their own next gens, but weight loss is finally an indication for medicine. But it's also like, yeah, it's a bit cosmeceutical more than it is medical, to be honest. Like, the type 2 indication was the important one because it was glycemic control that you wanted. And GLPs were competing with insulin and other drugs like DPP-4s more than they were competing with diet and exercise. And now I think the obesity indication is bigger than the type 2 indication. People want these drugs, whether they're diabetic or not. And, it was a big move. It's been somewhat recent. But Lilly had been cooking with Trulicity for a while. And now, obviously, with Mounjaro, they're the biggest drug company in the world, bigger than Novo. So Lilly is kind of the new killer company. I like this little company, Viking. It's not great. It's okay. But I like that stock. I think y'all should buy it. But VKTX.
Are you familiar with that company, Humacyte, something like that?
Yeah.
Is that a one trick pony, do you reckon, or?
I don't know them well, but
I've seen the senator from Alabama, I think. He went in it when it was like trading at 4, I think. He made like
I don't think it is.
200%,
Yeah,
I think.
it it doesn't have anything to do with obesity. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's like a weird kind of med tech type company. It's like not exactly a drug, you know?
Hello, guys. Hello, Martin. I would have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
One regarding your past, because this is where I got to know you. One regarding trading strategy, and another one regarding your personal life, if you don't mind. So,
Go ahead.
okay, thank you. So, the first one is regarding Blab. I don't know if you remember. This is where I got to
Yeah.
know you. Do you plan to do any educative content like you used to do, or is it something totally other?
I'd love to. I don't have the time
Mhm.
to prepare. When I made those videos, I tried to prepare. Sometimes I didn't, but I generally tried to prepare as much as I could to give people really good content. I put a lot of time into it, and I'm managing my startup, so I don't have the same time. But I am working on a couple things, so maybe I'll have the time. But I have a lot of things going on right now, so I'm mostly focused on my job. I have a lot of investors that expect me to work hard to make money for them.
For
So,
sure.
but I think I can squeeze in some things like finance for sure, but I also want to teach like programming and math and a few other things. I like to teach, but I also to teach you have to really know.
Definitely. So you
And
need
I
to
find
so you need
myself
to learn also at the same time before basically you
exactly,
spend time
yeah.
on that. So yeah, not that easy. What happened? I remember that you were starting to work on the mean stack, if you remember at that time. Uh,
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I remember everything. And for basically because you were like working with a company, or I don't remember, and you had like basically launched, I think, a company, something like that, and you wanted to
Yep.
personally understand the intrinsic and what they were doing. You remember? So what happened to those
Sure.
companies? Can you tell us more about that during those
Yeah, I mean,
10?
I have a software company now, and we some of the people from back then are with me now, and I had to spend 5 years, unfortunately, out of the business world. And I'm at our software company. I do a lot of, I do management, but I also do programming. And earlier on, when we were just starting the company, I did quite a lot of programming. But now we have some very talented programmers, and I can let them do their job because I'm not as good as they are. But I still do some programming every now and then, and I certainly do a lot of prototyping. So I think back then you caught me in my programming renaissance, which not many people got to see.
Yeah,
But I basically,
you
yeah,
you were on the books. You
basically,
remember? I don't know if it was the
yeah, oh
right
yeah,
thing because generally speaking, we rather learn with like tutorials, like on Udemy with 28 hours, boom, with professional, and then we
yeah,
take those shortcuts. I don't know if you use that.
yeah. I mean, I think that you have to mix the two kinds of learning, experiential with, you know, documents and written know-how or whatever, crystallized kind of languaged, documentation. So like you have to practice, obviously, and try it out. But just like investing, right? Everyone in the room, I think, has tried out trading. But then you also need to try out reading about it and studying it.
Definitely.
Well, one of these things is much more fun than the other. It's much more fun to trade and forget about, and you will learn by trading, right? You will learn by investing what works and what doesn't. But you won't learn everything. And the same thing with programming. As a kid, I used to program every single day, every hour of the day, all summer, and then partially as well during the school years. Instead of going to summer camp, I just sat with my computer and programmed. Now, the problem is if you do that, nobody's going to tell you about data structures. Nobody's going to tell you about all this stuff and teach you like, oh, hey, this is how recursion works, and you can refactor this to be more recursive, and that way the function will go faster, it's a cleaner code, etc. Nobody tells you that. you have to learn that in a book because it's not going to come to you in your head, unless you're a genius. Most of these things will not come to you for the first time in your head. Complexity is another example. Complexity, I'm reading Sipser's book, MIT professor, computer science. Sipser's Introduction to Complexity it's very important to understand this stuff at some point. If you're programming, especially advanced programming, you want to understand, what complexity class algorithms are in. This is pretty advanced stuff, especially for a self-taught programmer. It's not going to dawn on you, why is this algorithm slower than this other one? Some of it is common sense, obviously, but some of it is not. And being able to articulate it is another thing. So I think, you need to mix book learning with practice. And in investing, that book learning comes from, there's a lot of classics, but a lot of people don't know what the right books are to read. You might go to Barnes and Nobles and pick up How to Get Rich Quick by John C. Scammer when you should be reading, Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham or Snowball about Warren Buffett or something like that. And you might take a page from there or a page from somewhere else, and you can make investing a hobby. What I said earlier, I didn't mean to really dissuade anyone. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what they're up against. Now, if you take up programming as a hobby, you're not up against anybody. You make a program that's useful for you or your friends. Yes, there's competition and other people, but you might come up with a program nobody's ever come up with before. Not so in the stock market. In the stock market, everyone's fighting over the same 8,000 stocks. There's guys who we've mentioned, like Citadel and Jane Street. They have programmed computers to look at every single stock every second with the tightest of accuracy and the most amount of investment you can imagine, $1 billion every year. My colleague worked at one of these firms, Two Sigma. They spend $1 billion on software, their own software, to study the market and make automatic decisions. This is very hard to compete with. If you write software as a hobby, it doesn't cost you any money. In fact, you might make money. It's a very valuable skill. That's a better hobby. You learn something that grows your mind. This investing doesn't really grow your mind unless you do it in a very cerebral way. Most likely it's closer to gambling. It's more fun, but software is more useful. I mean, if you know how to program software, you have a great understanding of computers. You can make software that makes your day better, makes your day go faster, or is just fun. And, it's not easy per se, but it's very rewarding once you get the hang of it. And, it's just a great field, and you're not going to lose any money. Like I said, best is you're probably going to have more skills to make more money in your job or find a new job or something like that. And we all live around computers 24/7, so why not learn to really use them by programming? So to me, this is like an obvious advantage. Now, I unfortunately spent 20 years being a professional investor, and the reason I do these calls is because I hate to see that all go to waste. If I was smarter, I would just stop thinking about it forever. But I will say that investing gave me a disciplined way to look at capital allocation within a business, and that businesses themselves are investments. And in fact, look at Ryan Cohen. He's got a couple $1 billion or more to invest. And he's not investing like you and me are investing in the stock market, trading a stock. He's investing in other businesses, maybe through acquisition. He's investing in new product ideas through capital deployment. So he's investing as well. It's just a different way, but it's still kind of the same thing.
Hey, Martin.
He's trying to get a return. Yeah.
Your business stuff will make you a better technologist too. And we can talk offline, but because knowing ROI and having a pragmatic streak, it's very easy in the technology world. You see this with programmers all the time that want to learn something or use something because it'll be fun or interesting and not because it's the best thing. And it's like, why are we doing this? Oh, because it's fun or because it's there. And it's like, no, we got to make
Sure.
money. And so it will help you a lot. When
you
you
also
measure
can't
skills.
kill the spirit of people too, right? Like if you crush people's
But
fun,
Martin,
you can.
there is just something
You can hurt.
that when you talk
Yeah.
about like, okay, you can learn programming and then basically program your own bot. But I have a question for you. Is it still relevant in a world where, for example, I don't know if you know that, on any coin exchange, they provide bots where you can basically
I'm not
input your own strategy or use already predefined strategy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting people become quantitative programmers. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can learn JavaScript and make fun web apps for yourself or your family or friends. Yeah, I'd say the chances that any of us could become great quantitative investors is almost impossible. It's like, good luck. I mean, maybe.
I mean, heck,
But it seems
most people could learn basic scripting and save themselves 20 to 30 minutes every day of their life, no matter what they did. Unless,
Yeah, but you have to waste years to learn it.
not
necessarily.
years.
Yeah.
No.
I just had another question regarding, like, I would like to have your thought on this one. It's really specific. So basically, when I was watching your video and what you were basically teaching, basically you were taking stock by stock and a lot of time also penny stock, and you were like analyzing them from a quantitative point of view, but I think that you were quite diversified, in my opinion. What would you think about an alternative that would be, for example, to use Elliott waves? I don't know if you are knowledgeable about that, if you are like really big into Elliott waves, and if you have already experimented that deeply and see how efficient it is, combined with golden ratio, which are like Fibonacci levels. What about doing that instead of quantitative analysis and mixing it with like less stocks, going on more premium stocks, even using leverage, knowing that they move really slow? Isn't that easier and more secure in the end, and would give you the same return on investment? While if you would do a quantitative analysis on multiple penny stocks and few premium stocks, what do you think about that?
Well, everyone has their own methods, and whatever works for you is what's important, what makes you comfortable. I think that Elliott wave theory is a really interesting idea, that there are, in like basically all human phenomenon, there are sort of like common kind of starting and endings. I think that's true. And it's important to recognize like where you are in those things. But I think that's more philosophical than the way people implement Elliott wave theory, which is more technical. I'm not a big technical guy. I don't like golden ratio or Fibonacci, but I think that there are plenty of people that use it and feel like it works for them. So I would never discourage that. If I know that there are some investors that I know that use technical analysis and they think it works for them and they like it, and that's great, And then I also know people that do different kinds of technical analysis and they like it and it works for them, and that's fine. It doesn't work for me. It's not my thing, but if it works for you, that's great. I think concentration is always a recipe for more volatility and also more returns and risk. So like I said earlier, if everyone has one stock, you might trick yourself into thinking you're a genius, but try to do that same thing with 50 stocks or 100 stocks, and I think you'll learn pretty quickly that you're just average. And if you're just average, you might as well not spare yourself the trouble. So if you could find 5 more GameStops, and I guarantee you there will be 5 game stocks that have better returns than GameStop. Why can't you find them? And the answer is because most likely you don't have the talent. And I hate to say this because I feel like I'm a jerk, but I also imagine somebody on American Idol going up to sing to Simon Cowell, and Simon says, "I'm sorry, but you're not, Madonna, you're not Christina Aguilera, you're just a fucking shitty singer." And the reality is that's the medicine some of us need to hear. We don't want to hear it because it, it sucks, but
No, you're right.
it's the truth. And maybe one of us is super, not me, but one of us is really, really good at this naturally, and they found their calling. Bravo, God bless you, you'll be very rich. But for the rest of us, unfortunately, if you're really good at stock picking, find another stock. and maybe you'll find one that's even better than GameStop, but chances are you're not, and you're just picking random shit, and that'll be that. Now, if you do find that other stock and it's really good, then you're on your way and your career is going to be great. But for most people, this is just a gamble, just for some fun, and the real. And most people in here, I don't think are even in GameStop, but I think that I think it's important for people to read this and hear this. And I think my biggest advice to people is that they focus on what they're truly good at, and they don't try to sort of make a second career, because this is like very silly. For example, some of the most common investors are doctors and dentists. They love to invest. Why? Because they're rich. They have a lot of money from their practices, and they don't know what to do with it. They got tons of cash, and they want to buy stocks with it. Why? Because they're bored, and they got the disposable income. What they should be doing is putting that money in a safe place and forgetting about it. But instead, they want to take what they've been gifted. It's a gift to make that much money as a doctor or dentist. It really is. Millions of dollars I've been gifted. And now I want to take that and risk it and do more with it. It's crazy. If you've gotten that money and you're that good, just keep making it. Or maybe you can open another practice or expand your practice or do something like that, because you're good at that. You're not good at investing. This is like when Michael Jordan tried to become a baseball player, if anybody remembers that.
And golf player
terrible.
Also, I think.
Yeah, all these guys who tried to do something different, they should have stuck to basketball, or should have stuck to whatever it was that they're really good at, because it's not every day you can switch disciplines that you've honed. You spent your whole career trying to be a doctor and make millions of dollars. You finally did it, and now you want to be a professional investor. What? It's just as likely as somebody, going from being an NBA star to, a baseball star. Has it happened before? Yeah, I think Deion Sanders is one or two examples where they could cross sports. But in general, I think Bo Jackson was another one. It's happened twice, as far as I know.
You said dentists and investing. It kind of gave me a flashback that you'll probably remember as well. Remember the Six Flag bonds that were owned by that dentist association?
No, that's
and
hilarious.
they could hold up the restructuring, so they got paid. And that's
I know they. Yeah,
that's the collection
I know
of
they went
dentists going,
bankrupt.
we're the smartest fucks in the world.
I know the Six Flags went bankrupt, and that was a big thing. But I didn't know there was a group of dentists that
Yeah,
owned
it
the
was a
stock.
dentist association that could
Or
hold it
owned the
up because
bonds.
when they needed the money. It was hilarious, and everyone was like, who owns it? What are you talking about? It was hilarious. Anyway, very funny, because it was the one random time where you had a collection of dentists that literally were on the supreme winning side. They had everybody by the balls in the restructuring.
That's great. Is usually when your dentist asks you about a stock, that's usually the biggest counter signal. That's the oldest saying in Wall Street. Like,
the pigs don't fly.
If your dentist is in a stock, it's all over. Like, that's the greatest short.
It's like going to China and the cab driver in a third-tier city talking about how he owns 3 apartments.
Yeah. I mean, it's people always say they have their contrary indicators. Like when your dad finally calls you and says, "What about this AI thing? Should I buy Nvidia?" That's the time where it's probably over for Nvidia. But of course, these things aren't foolproof either. Nvidia could go up another 5x. I don't know.
The scary thing is my dad's already in Nvidia. I think a lot of dads are. And they've been riding it for a while too, which is crazy.
And they've been geniuses.
I was going to say, your dad could be Warren Buffett. Your dad could be Philippe Lafont, any famous investor. So it doesn't mean anything, right? My dad was not a famous investor. So if my dad called me and said, "I'm trying to buy Nvidia stock. What do you think, Martin?" I'd say, "All right, time to sell all of mine, go short, etc."
It's so funny you say that, because you know how we always have to eat crow. I was down in Virginia Beach, and my buddy's a SEAL team guy, and he was like, "I own a bunch of Nvidia. What do you think?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's had a run, man. I wouldn't own that much." And he ended up holding on to it, and then he called me. He's like, "I thought you were supposed to be the Wall Street guy. I made a fucking fortune off this." I'm like, "Ah, shit."
Oh man, I have had so many stories like that. I was running my small hedge fund, and it was, I want to say 2011, and this guy comes in. He's a somewhat famous guy in biopharma. He invented he was on the patent for the antibody, which is a fundamental important thing in biopharma, and he had some money from that. But more importantly, his wife was Steve Jobs' lawyer, and at some point he either paid her in stock or somehow she got a bunch of stock. And he said, Martin, our family has $180 million of Apple stock. What do I do? And I told him it was dog, and that he should sell. And pretty much the worst call I've ever made in my life, and
Oh God, it's so weird.
anybody's ever made.
I'll tell you what, though, you could have this one too. I'd love to hear your story on this because I think it would be funny for everybody. And it's happened to everybody who's pro, is when you're like, this is definitely a short or definitely a long, and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning running into the office going, do the opposite of what I just said. Do the opposite of what I just said. Because whatever came to you in a dream that night, you just flip your position 180 degrees.
Oh, all the time. All the time, for sure. Like, this industry just creates crazy people, is all it does. Like, the people who are like really good at this shit are nuts. And to be a well-adjusted investor that's like not lost your mind is really difficult. And Buffett had the advantage of not having outside investors, really. He had outside stockholders, but he didn't have investors breathing down his neck. And he told them ahead of time what the rules were. He said, you're not going to breathe down my neck. I'm not going to do it. And he said, I can't do it if you do it that way. And unfortunately for everyone else who has outside investors, they are on your ass. They do want to know, what stock do you like today? What stock did you like tomorrow? What about this? You told me that. It's a real grind. And that's why Kramer, has the hardest job in the world, and he gets a lot of shit. But, the reality is he's got a tough job. Everything that they ask of him is every stock on the planet, what's your opinion? And if you got that being recorded,
Yeah.
it's easy to be proven wrong.
It was a sad day. This year, Buffett was really slow at the annual meeting.